Sorry, hey. So this, the insights that I'm going to talk about today come from a project on Polish and Lithuanian social media. And it would not have been possible without a large multinational, multidisciplinary team where, in addition to the scientists that I have on the right, we also had a number of undergraduate and graduate students working on this in 3 different countries. And this was a multidisciplinary team where we had computer scientists, psychologists, computational linguists, and more. So what I'm going to talk about today is some critiques of some of the typically used automated emotion detecting automated emotion systems. I'm going to discuss a little bit of emotion theory, so drop a little knowledge and critiques there. I'll give you some illustrations as to why using theory-based emotion annotation is important, and then beg you for future work where we can do better. So the main 4 critiques that I have of automated emotion systems are, and these are things like Vader and NRC and others, is that they often are made just for English and maybe a couple other languages, and they're not very well transferred to what are considered low resource languages like Polish and Lithuanian, among others. Most of them are just looking at lexical elements. So they're looking at words or they're looking at combinations of letters. So they ignore all the multimedia content, which if you spend any time on social media, there's a lot of that. They also tend to be not very good with context, culture, sarcasm. And most of them also don't tend to measure emotional complexity, which is the simultaneous instance of multiple emotions. And I'm going to be giving you some examples of emotional complexity. Also, they use some outdated, contested, and or incomplete emotion theory. So they're not really up to date there. And my takeaway that I'd like you to take from this talk is that methods that ignore the breadth of emotional experience will limit your questions, your findings, and any new theorizing you can do. So poor methods are not as useful. So we can do better. We can do multidisciplinary computational social science. So I think the low resource language one is sort of clear, and I'll be giving you some examples in Polish later. But the 2 critiques I want to touch on right now are if you're ignoring multimedia content and the context, and if you're only saying this post has to show me one emotion, then you're going to ignore a lot of what's actually going on in your social media post that you might want to be analyzing for some reason. So here's an example from 2018. Somebody said, why on earth would Trump pull out of the WTO, #FridayFeeling? If you're using an automated emotion detector that only looks at those words, you're going to miss a lot of what's going on in this post, which I don't even have to go into great detail about what all that is. But there are lots of different emotions, both in the post and that they want you to have. So here's another example from my favorite internet cat, Jorts, where Variety, anyone who knows Jorts is great. Variety was talking about the possibility of using AI in Hollywood. And then Jorts was saying, sure, here we are going to a film produced by Scab AI. We love it. We are happy. It's not a total nightmare. And then there's a picture of an AI picture where, you look at this, and as a human being who lives on the internet, you can look at this and say, Jorts is being sarcastic. He's not actually happy. This is an incredibly disturbing image of terrible, AI visualization. But if you are only using a lexical emotion annotator that is automatically detecting the words, you might say this is all just very positive and happy, and you're not going to see all what's going on there. So the next thing I'm going to go through is briefly some emotion theories. And this is, as an applied psychologist, this is an impression I get a lot, unfortunately, when I talk to computational scientists about emotion and social media, is there's been emotion theory since the 1960s, and unfortunately, a lot of these automated detectors have not caught up. So a lot of, not all, but most current emotion detectors use either they're looking at sentiment, which is fine, but not emotions, or Ekman's basic emotions, or something called Plutchik's wheel. So if you're looking at sentiment isn't the same as emotion, though it is related to core affect theory, which very briefly, Core affect theory, or constructivist theory, is the idea that when you have some sort of affective state, it's on 2 dimensions. One of them is this valence, negative to positive, or displeasure to pleasure. One of them is deactivation, sort of sleepiness, tired, to activation, very excited, very intense. And everything is constructed. So the idea is if you find yourself feeling low energy and negative, depending on what's going on in your life, you might interpret that as I'm feeling sad today. And of course, this varies by culture, individual differences. And the emotion detectors don't really talk about arousal and activation, but they still do valence. The next one, and you'll see this coming up in a number of different emotion detectors, is people talk about Ekman's basic emotions. And what that is there's this whole theory called the basic emotions approach, started in the 60s, but has been continuing. The idea is that there's only a small set of real emotions, or not real, but small set of discrete universal emotions. Everybody who's a human feels this. It's based on evolutionary theory involving signaling. So like if I want to show you I'm happy or show you I'm a threat, then I'm going to use my face to express this. And there's only 6, so now it's 7 basic emotions at all: happiness, contempt, and so on. And these all have in common that they have universal facial expressions. They are automatic, they're really brief, you can't help them, they just come at you. And they have distinctive physiology as well. However, so you know, this whole theory explicitly says that there's a lot of things that say you and I would consider to be emotions are not emotions. So love is not actually an emotion in this theory, just so you know. Hate is not an emotion. Shame, guilt, envy, nostalgia, those aren't emotions. Like those are something else, okay? So it's been defined to be very small set of things. Now, in his more recent writings, Ekman has admitted that maybe there's some other things that may end up being emotions, depending. But he has a very concrete set of criteria for what he considers to be emotions. You may not be surprised to hear there's a lot of fights over this theory in the emotion literature. So the folks who do core affect theory and the basic emotion theorists tend to have a lot of fights, very loud fights in the psychology literature. Some of the criticisms of basic emotion theory is facial expressions actually vary quite a lot between cultures, even within individuals, and that the basic emotion theory lacks some replicability and is not actually echoed in what we're learning about neuroscience of emotion. So it's not that there's nothing good about basic emotion theory. I actually took a class with Ekman, but let's just say it's not a science everyone would be agreeing with at this time. And then this one, the NRC uses this, and I've even seen articles that say, well, the psychology behind this is good. It is not actually good. Plutchik's wheel, he had this theory in 61, and he has this idea that emotions can be seen almost like a color wheel, but in 3 dimensions. There's opposites, there's similar ones, you have blends. So, one nice thing is he talks about there's different levels of intensity, different emotions are different levels of intensity. However, this theory actually has very poor support. So a review of his book in 1980 said, this is an interesting theory, but the author is uninterested in verifying it. This was in 80. Any research on it has not been empirically supported. You know how I mentioned that the basic emotion folks and the core affect people fight a lot? They don't even talk about this one. They just don't care because they don't think it's valid. There's other criticisms like it's supposedly based on psychoevolutionary theory, but there's no lust or sexual desire in this whole wheel, which if you think about it, like fundamentally, if you're going to have an evolutionary theory, you have to have that. So, and there's more. I could go on, but I will not. So what there is more modern emotion theory. Something called semantic space theory has come about. And what they do is they've done, we have all this big data we can do now, right? So they've collected huge corpora of vocalizations, facial expression, videos, writing, archaeological evidence from multiple cultures. And they suggest that emotions occur in what they call a high dimensional space. Let me see if can I scroll? What's happening? Maybe this will work. This seems to be paused. Oh, there we go. Okay. So this theory takes into account that emotions, of course, vary within individual, across situations, across cultures. Emotions can be short or long, so love can, in fact, be an emotion, shockingly. And they suggest there's at least 24 different emotions. And these pictures here that you can't really read can show that the clusters and where they appear kind of differ depending on the corpus. There's fuzzy boundaries and blends between things, so like contempt and anger can kind of bleed into each other. And using their corpora, they tried to test basic emotion theory and core affect theory, and they found those theories basically don't explain as much of the variance in the data as their theory. So this is a great new modern emotion theory. So we relied on this for our work. We did a huge effort where we had social media posts and we annotated them by 3 or 4 trained in-country native language speakers. So we're having Polish undergraduate and graduate students who've been trained for weeks about emotion and different kinds of emotion, look at these different posts, and they understand what the context is of these posts, right? They're also annotating for multiple emotions simultaneously. I say 23. Our old version of the code book had 23 emotions. It now has 26. Each emotion is coded not just is there anger there or not, but on a 0 to 100 scale, so you can get your nice intensity there. Includes all the multimedia content of the post, except the little reactions at the bottom. And when there's differences, we have consensus meetings, so people can say, I don't think there's any anger here, Joe. So what you end up with is, for example, this one. This is a post where the top says, fools in the parliament, clowns in the coalition. Only in people is the last hope. Watch and learn, pathetic politicians. This is what the people are doing. And it's a repost of a Facebook group about hospitals. And after consensus, we agreed there was a lot of contempt, also some anger, also some admiration, because there's other people, we're talking about what the people are doing, and some empathic pain, which is where you're sad for other people's pain. And or not exactly sad, but it's like, I feel for your pain, and then excitement. Everything else was 0. So that's one quick example. Anybody who likes numbers, we have pretty good reliability on this method because we train. The little dashes are because some of these emotions were so rare we couldn't basically calculate. So I want to give you guys some examples to have you all go through. So here's a Polish post from Facebook. Somebody says, my thoughts over coffee. Poland for the Poles is a slogan more or less as dumb as a slogan good because it's Polish. Poland is for people, for all law-abiding people, and something is good because it is good, nothing less and nothing more. And what they're doing is reposting a news story where it was talking about somebody on the subway was yelling at 2 Asian women. Passengers and police knew what to do, which assumedly is confront the person and get them off the train. Bravo. So let's say you were going to annotate this, and you could only do sentiment from -1 to 1. Like, what would you give this? Thanks, Joelle. Joelle had this idea. A 5. Sorry, I have 5 minutes. But you can see how this is a hard task, right? I know, the judge in the front. So you can see how just giving it 1 sentiment score is going to be really hard. Well, let's say you can step away from sentiment. You're allowed the 7 basic emotions. Maybe, which of these emotions would you say? Just holler out, I'll repeat. Happiness? Really? What? Disgust? Well, okay. This is why you train people. But sorry, disgust is like you want to throw up. You're just, it's so gross. Contempt, anger, yes. So you have some of that. But what if you could only pick 1? Because remember, a lot of these code things, you can only pick 1. So what we actually found was anger, contempt. We didn't find disgust, though maybe, Tammy, you can talk to the RAs about that. Hate, but there's also admiration in there, right? Because there's admiration for the passengers and police. Some excitement, fear. And you'll note the ones in yellow, those wouldn't have been there if we only used the basic 7. So here's another example, lots of fun. I'm going to first cover up the picture. Imagine You're an automated detector. You can't see the picture. You can only annotate the words. So this says, thank you, Ambassador Georgette Mossbacher. So what would you say for sentiment? It's 1. It's like positive, right? Well, now what if you see the picture? It's Peggy. It is Peggy Bundy. That's right. What if you only had these emotions? Like, what would you do with that? Nobody wants to answer now because they're scared. I'll say it's wrong. Somebody said contempt, I think. What was that? I'm hearing like contempt. So yeah, and if you only could pick one, maybe it'd be contempt, right? So we ended up finding, and by we I mean the amazing RAs in Poland, found, there's a lot of contempt, that's right, because they're actually making fun of the ambassador here. She evidently looks a bit like Peggy Bundy, and they're trying to draw an analogy to somebody who they think is not great. But you also have sexual attractiveness here because how she's dressed. And some gratitude because it's kind of unclear, is it a blend of actual gratitude and contempt, pride, but hate also. Like that's a lot going on in that one picture and those words, right? And again, you can see what you wouldn't find if you only looked with the Ekman's basic emotions. Also, you can't understand this picture without a lot of context. Who is this lady? What is this ambassador? What's going on? You got to be able to figure it out. So to end this, this is a big plea. I'm good. Yay. This is a big plea. Let's try to do better. Okay, let's try to, when we do social computational science, let's try to bring the best of social science and the best of computational science together. So try to see what's actually going on in the field, like in emotion. This also suggests the power of good annotation. So one of the problems with having crowdsource workers who may not know the cultural context, who aren't trained, these were people who were trained in, say, the differences between contempt, disgust, hate, anger, and so on. But if you're not really trained, it's going to be hard. There's a data set, which I will not name, where they claimed reliability had to be over 0 to be good. That's actually not even what the reliability standard is. It has to be like over 0.7. And also, when you're doing social media, emotion research or not, you want to look at multimedia. You don't want to just look at the words. There's a lot going on in these posts. It's why people are posting. And in short, scientific discovery is only possible when you have good measurement. Good measurement comes from and also leads to good theory, but you can't even have the scientific discovery at all unless you have good measurement. So thank you. And also thanks to our big team.